Hello, my name is Derek Thomas. I have with me today my cohort and dear friend Jeremy Smith, and we're here to interview Ligon Duncan, who has just returned from the Lausanne Congress in Cape Town, South Africa. And Jeremy and I wanted to interview you, Ligon, on what was your first experience of a Lausanne Congress. Tell us a little bit about your initial impressions.
Well, I mean, it was exhilarating and instructive. The testimonies that were given by people working especially in countries which are formally closed to the gospel and where it's very dangerous to bear Christian witness, those testimonies were inspirational and convicting. There were times when I heard testimonies that made me just want to go back to my room and curl up in the fetal position and think about the implications of that. I felt my own ministry didn't have the kind of risk involved in it that many of the people that I encountered. Their ministry does have that kind of risk in it, and so I met a lot of brave people. And when you're around those kinds of Christians, it's exhilarating, and you feel alive when you're around people that are ready to give everything for the sake of the gospel. So I had wonderful experiences throughout the week, because every day there were testimonies of that nature that spurred you on in the Christian faith. I mean, I should also say, from the standpoint of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals and Reformation 21, obviously there were theological distinctives that were highlighted there that some of us would have very significant issues with. There was an inadequate relating of social responsibility to the gospel in several of the messages. There was a real strong push for sort of a feminist egalitarianism with regard to pastoral ministry that I think most of our listeners and readers would take issue with, and I would certainly take issue with. But for me, the positives that I came away from the conference with made me very thankful that I was there.
Jeremy, you and I were talking a little earlier, and you were addressing how perhaps these worldwide conferences, congresses, affect either a denomination or the local church in terms of evangelism. And what was your question?
What does a local church need to be aware of with respect to global missions themes, the things that folks in the evangelical world, worldwide, are thinking about? What does a local church need to be aware of? What are the hot topics? What are the things being discussed and looked at?
Well, let me pull back and answer that in the framework of the question that you sort of hinted at. A lot of folks would say, well, a conference like this is a waste of time because a conference like this is not going to have long-lasting effect. Well, to me, that's almost an immaterial question, what the influence of this particular Congress is, because the people and the organizations there represented are going to have significant effects missiologically. So being at that Congress allowed me to see the kinds of effects that those people and those organizations are going to have long term. And that in and of itself was significant for me and enables me to come back and tell my local church what are the things that are happening out there missiologically, what are the trends. And some very big things came to mind. One is, it is very clear to me that missiologically, we have work to do in evangelicalism in relating the gospel and especially proclamation to social responsibility, or other languages often use social justice and things of that nature. It is very, very clear to me from Lausanne that the wider evangelical community is not adequately biblical in their thinking about those issues, and it is going to have massive ramifications missiologically. So just to be able to see that at the Lausanne Congress, not to agree with the presentations or not even to disagree with every presentation, but just to see it was helpful to me, because I do believe that one of the things that conservative, reformed, evangelical Christians in the Western world, Europe, Britain, United States, Canada, etc., one thing that we can offer in the global conversation is some reflection on the doctrine of the church in this area, and to say where we've gone wrong. Let me give you one example. One poignant example of this to me was when the General Secretary of the World Council of Churches was invited to give sort of a fraternal greeting from the World Council of Churches to Lausanne. And that's a practice that goes all the way back to 1974 with Billy Graham. They've tried not to be in a publicly adversive sort of relationship with the World Council of Churches while saying we're going to do something very different than the World Council of Churches is about. The General Secretary of the World Council of Churches was very excited about the fact that Lausanne had finally come to understand what the World Council understands about social responsibility. And there was almost a condescending tone to it. You know, we're glad that you little evangelicals have finally caught on to what we know is important. But there's an interesting picture in that the World Council of Churches is dead and dying. And I think they're dead and dying in part because they got this question wrong theologically. And I think the message to Lausanne ought to be, don't be so quick to try and catch up with what just killed them. And so that's clearly an area where a lot of work needs to be done. And let me just go ahead and say it, and it'll get back to him because this is going on the internet and things get around on the internet. But the answers that are being given out of the Lausanne Covenant and the book The Mission of God by Chris Wright are not going to be the answers that give us the final help that we need in this area. We need more rigorously gospel-centered, biblically rooted answers to the question of those relationships than are being given at the present.
Now, your friends were there, John Piper and Tim Keller, and you met Vaughan Roberts.
Yeah.
But there were other speakers that you perhaps had not heard of before that impressed you?
Yes, I've had the privilege of hearing Ajit Fernando before, and of course John Piper on many occasions, and not Vaughan Roberts. And all three of those brothers did outstanding jobs in their plenaries, as did Tim Keller when he addressed the Congress on the gospel in the city. It was very, very good. Oz Guinness and David Wells in their multiplex on globalization were superb and struck several notes that really the whole assembly needed to hear and think about, but only those that were in that multiplex session, which was a very large session. I don't know, maybe 1,000 showed up for that multiplex, but I wish the whole assembly could have heard what they had to say. Oz did have a very strong opening day clarion call on the issue of the truth, and basically said, if this Congress is not going to be concerned about the issue of the truth, then you might as well just pack your bags and go home now, which I thought was a really good message to send, and clearly raised the hackles on some who were there, but they needed their hackles raised if they didn't like that message.
What are the lasting issues for you, as you know, a year or 2 years from now? What do you think will be the thing that you'll come away with?
Well, one is I do believe that those of us who are part of the conservative evangelical reform community in the United States, if we do not pour our resources into the global South, and especially theological resources for the training of the ministry in the global South, we're missing the boat. We need to be a part of investing in what's happening there. We will learn from them, to be sure. We've got a lot to learn from them. But we've got some things to offer that other parts of evangelicalism do not have to offer. And the kind of sound theological commitment is huge.
Thank you, Ligon.
Sure.
Thanks.